Hey, what's up everybody? How you doing? It's Robert Anthony, Living with Rob. Today, I'm going to, for a mere $50, show you how you can reduce stress while traveling with your RV in tow. Let's get into it. So, I am the proud owner of a Winnebago Micro Mini FLX series 2108DS. Now, one of the reasons I'm making this type of video is because we're getting ready to hit the road and we're going to live out of our RV to do photography and video for our Living with Rob brand. But as part of that process, one of the things that I've been doing is preparing to have successful travels. I mean, after all, we're living in a house that we're pulling behind a vehicle, and in our case, that house is going to be pulled through some pretty rough terrain. The Utah deserts, the Arizona deserts, the forests of Wyoming and Denver, getting up into the northwest corridor. We're going to be going all over the place, and not the least of which is probably traveling to Alaska next summer, the summer of 2024. So through this process, I've joined a couple of Facebook groups, and I've learned that one of the issues that the Winnebago Micro Minis are prone to have happen is the water tanks will drop. Now, in that community, you're encouraged to not travel with your water tank full. That's fine. You know, you're adding, in this case, a 31-gallon tank, about 275, 300 pounds that you're pulling. That does make sense. But when you're getting ready to go off-grid and you're going to be driving 15 or 20 miles off of the pavement, if you will, you're going to be bobbling this thing around as you're pulling out to where you're going to stay for 8 or 10 or 14 days or whatever it is. That tank is going to undergo significant stress as it's full of water. Well, the engineers at Winnebago have done a miserable job at bracing these tanks up. And so today, what I'm going to do is show you how I chose to brace my tank to make it prepared, hence reducing my stress in one of the most significant stressors that these trailers go under, and that is that water tank dropping. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to need to buy. In my case, if you're going to do what I did, you're going to need to purchase half-inch threaded rod. So I bought 2 pieces of half-inch threaded rod. And by the way, everything that I bought will be in the product description below, so you can go buy it yourself if you'd like. So 12-inch half-inch threaded rod times 2, 4 half-inch nylon locking nuts, 4 3/8-inch bolts. Now I bought 1 inch. I would recommend reducing that back to 3/4 inch or even 5/8 of an inch, as well as 3/8-inch nylon locking nuts. You're also going to need 2 strips of angle iron, heavy-duty angle iron, some 3M90 is what you're going to need, spray 90, some kind of a rubber mat that you can cut up, or pieces of rubber. And once you're finished, you are going to need some underbelly patching tape, because you're going to be pulling your underbelly out, and some great stuff, multi-purpose black. You'll be needing that as well. So let's talk about what I did. The first thing that I did is I had to pull back the underbelly to where the water tank is exposed. Now, in my particular model, the 2108 FLX DS, the water tank sits right above the axles. It's a 2-axle trailer, so it sits sort of above the axles, a little bit forward of the front axle. And one of the braces sits along one of the joists that go back and forth. Now, what you're going to notice as you're looking at this is the significant difference in the thickness of the angle iron that I'm using compared to the angle aluminum, for all I care, braces that they have. They take this tank and they just set it in a channel up above with a little bit of a lip, and when it's heavy, that tank is flexing. If it's bouncing around down there, the aluminum that they're using to hold these tanks up is so thin that it's just going to drop. And so I just didn't want to deal with that. Now mine had a piece of angle iron between the 2 sides of the camper, not heavy enough. Let's talk a little bit about what I did. So I exposed the tank, and then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to cut an access panel farther back in your underbelly so that you can get up to where you need to get up to. So the very first thing that I did is I cut 2 inches off of each of the 36-inch pieces of angle iron. The span that you're going to need to span is about 32 inches. You've got a few inches to spare. So I bought the 36-inch angle iron and I cut 2 pieces off that were 2 inches long. Then I pre-drilled some holes. I pre-drilled a 3/8-inch hole in one side of that, and then a 1/2-inch hole in the other side of that angle iron. Once that was done, the next project became getting access to that top rail on the back side of the tank. Now, this was a project. When you get up there to do that, you will notice as you're poking around and feeling your underbelly that goes up against the camper, it's flexible, it's cloth, and there are going to be joists. You want to make sure, because you're going to drill a 3/8-inch hole in the top channel where your water tank is at, you're going to drill a 3/8-inch hole there. You need to be able to manipulate your fingers in there. If you're real close to one of those joists, and you'll feel it when you're underneath there, you're not going to be able to get your fingers down in there because the joist will be in the way. So you'll notice that I have a hole that's drilled. I figured this out after that first hole was drilled on the passenger side of the rig. I had to drill another hole. Now, the reason that I say were I to do this over again is because that 1-inch 3/8-inch bolt was a nightmare to get through that hole. You got to work in there with your fingers like this, and in doing so, you are trying to finagle it between the tank lip and everything else. So if that were shortened by even 1/4 of an inch, so going down to a 3/4 inch 3/8-inch bolt or a 5/8-inch bolt if they make one, it would have been much easier to navigate that in there. Plus, it would create a little headroom for the 1/2-inch that's about to come through next. So once that was attached, I then took the 1/2-inch rod, threaded it through, and I screwed that in, ratcheted that thing on while holding the top with a vice grip to keep the rod from spinning as I was tightening it down. Once that was done on both sides, I did 2. Now the hanging portion is prepared to be dealt with. So then I took the angle iron and I drilled a 1/2-inch hole in one end, and I waited to drill the 3/8-inch hole in the other end, and I'll explain why in a second. But once I drilled that 1/2-inch hole through the angle iron, I put the angle iron on the back side up, is what I did. And once that's up and beginning to get threaded on, I was able to pull that up pretty close to where I thought that it would need to be. After which time, I then cut a couple of strips in the rubber mat. So I cut 2-inch strips, about 30 inches long, that I would then glue to the tank. Now the reason for this is because you don't want your tank to set on those metal angle brackets if at all possible. You want something to cushion them, and you want it to be affixed, and it needs to be pretty sturdy. So I had a spare rubber mat that we weren't going to be using, cut that 2-inch strips, and then I used the 3M90 to glue those strips onto the tank itself. Once those were on, they weren't moving, but in order to get them in the right spot, I went to the front portion of the trailer. I manipulated the angle iron to about where I thought that I would want it to be, and then I marked real quick, just simply, I need it to be right about here. And so then I used the 3M90, follow the instructions, sprayed it, put it on, and it sticks right now. It's like contact cement, and once that's stuck, it's stuck on there for good. It is not coming off. From that point, that gave me exactly where I would need to be, so I took the angle iron. I had a second pair of hands with Joelle. She helped me push those threaded rods forward a little bit. They did need to be manipulated forward. The span from side to side ended up being a little bit longer, so I had her push those rods forward just enough that I could then mark where I needed to drill in to the angle iron through the frame on the camper. So you'll see here where I attached those, I held those in place and drilled them. Now make sure you're wearing safety goggles whenever you're doing this metal drilling. You want to exercise extreme caution as you're doing that, because it will get hot. The metal gets hot, and there's a lot of metal that comes down. So I then drilled up through, and then I successfully attached the 3/8-inch bolts up through the bottom with the 3/8-inch locking nut. That then allowed me to go back to the back and pull those up till it was just pushing the tank enough that it was off the frame just a smidge, knowing that the water, when the water gets in that tank and fills it up, is going to weight that thing down, and it's just going to sit on those brackets. So that's how I braced up the tank. A little bit of elbow grease, 50 bucks into it, and I am now stress-free knowing that regardless of where we go, regardless of how we're bobbling around, that tank is going to be secure. To finish up the project, we then had to reinstall the underbelly, which is just a matter of tucking it in. And as you're going along, what you're going to want to make sure that you do is you're going to want to use the great stuff, and you're going to want to reseal around where the underbelly meets the frame. I noticed in my underbelly when I pulled it down, they had taken great stuff and they had basically put it in all the way up to the front. I'm assuming that that's done to try to keep critters from getting into that area. They will find that when it is cold, and they will naturally, their instincts are going to pull them up there, and you don't want mice crawling around in there. Oh, and I will mention, when I pulled this down, I'm grateful that I did, because the tank heater that was installed on my freshwater tank was installed poorly. About 3/4 of it had come disattached. It was barely hanging on. So I did pick up a new, from Falcon or Facon or whoever it's from, I picked up a new tank heater, and I installed the tank heater, rewired it, and affixed it, made sure that it was affixed properly prior to putting the underbelly up, because of course we will be traveling in the winter. So the underbelly goes up. There are a couple of strips of aluminum that they use to attach it to the frame. I resealed it with the great stuff, and then finally took the underbelly tape and reattached it to the access panel that I cut out near the backside past the second axle to make sure that that stays taped up. Used a little bit of isopropyl rubbing alcohol or alcohol to clean that off, to make sure that the surface would stick very successfully with the underbelly tape. So that is the purpose of this video, and I hope that it gives you something that you can see. This is an easy fix. It's going to just take an afternoon. You're going to need a second pair of hands more than likely, and it just requires some elbow grease and some ingenuity, but it is such a relief to me knowing that the water tank in this unit is completely secure. We don't have to worry about it falling off. So I hope that you found this video helpful. I'd like to remind you to visit us online at livingwithrob.com. You can purchase a lot of my landscape photography that we're doing. And you know, we just love to have you around. Subscribe to the blog, get inspired, maybe receive some advice or some encouragement in your own life to you know, maybe just inspire you to perhaps not exactly pursue the angle that we're doing with giving up everything and living in a camper down by the river, but at the very minimum, maybe reevaluating some of the priorities that you have in your life, not the least of which is reducing your stress so that you can live more at peace, which is what we're doing by bracing this tank. Thanks for watching. I want to give a shout out to my friend Jerry. Thank you so much for your willingness to come out and look at this as an engineering brain and figure out the best solution for this. Couldn't have done it without you. And I also want to give a shout out to my friend Dave, who bought me breakfast today before making this video. He is such an encouragement to me. I just so much appreciate having you in my corner as we attempt to tackle this huge risk that we're taking with this YouTube channel. Love you guys. Glad you're here. Like, subscribe, share, leave a comment in the comment section below. We love to interact with you. That means the world to us. Thanks for stopping by. I will see you in the next one.